Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcoming all of you to this press conference. The major achievement of Islamic revolution in Iran is to create a polity, a democracy based on Islamic rationality. This experience, which have created a social economical democracy based on Islamic rationality rather than secular liberal rationality, we think is an important achievement of our nation, a great experience that others can take a look to it as a great contribution to the evolution of human civilization. And fortunately, in the last 3 decades, Iran turned to be not only the major democracy in the Middle East, but one of the most advanced countries in the Middle East in science and technology. And the recent events in the Middle East also is a welcoming sign that democracy based on Islamic rationality is picking up. We are welcoming this process all across Middle East. We regret that countries, especially Western countries and the United States, is failing to recognize the depth of the events in the Middle East. We quite understand that the fall of dictators one after another, which used to be strategic allies of the United States in the region, is a great failure and setback for American interests in the region. But rather than to confront this process, we strongly recommend that the strategic interest of the United States in the region should be redefined, so it should be reconciled with the wish of the people of the region. Also, we think that United States, paranoid about the position and the influence of Iran, which is a natural influence in the region, not for dominance, but based on cultural ties, is generating vicious circles of hostility against Iran, the language of threat, the chain of resolutions, one after another, based on false allegations, is creating a hostile atmosphere in the region, invigorating hostility and destabilizing the region. And we think this is of utmost importance for international community, and also UN mechanism should not be used as a mouthpiece and a vehicle for pursuing these objectives. So Islamic Republic of Iran is open in all policies and endeavors in the region, internally and externally. In order that you have more time to ask me questions, I stop at this moment, and I will be at your disposal to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Larijani. I would like to request you, no, we can take your question, but I ask you to only one clear and short questions. Please identify yourself and your affiliation at the first of your question. We can start with Vice President of ANGA, Mr. Haidar from Dawn of Pakistan.
Thank you very much. On behalf of United Nations Correspondents Association.
I'm supposed to ask it today.
Huh?
I'm supposed to ask it today if you don't mind.
What, I mean, I've
He
been
won't
asked
call
now.
on me.
Listen.
He won't call on me.
Huh?
He won't call on me otherwise. He'll call on you after.
He called me first.
All right, Mr.
On behalf of United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you very much for this press conference. I'd like to ask you, given the history of the disrespect between the United States and Iran and for hostile relations that have been going on for such a long time. What is it that you believe or you propose that somehow the relations between the United States and Iran, which can never be normalized under the present circumstances, that a first step be taken by Iran and not by the United States? And what is it that the United States has done which can help, the United States can do, which can help normalize the relations?
Well, when President Obama came to power and he promised change, I was personally more hopeful that he could be able to define and formulate change for his policy in the Middle East and vis-a-vis Iran. But I think this hope was wrong totally, and either he couldn't or he didn't know how to bring change in the region and also the relation with Iran. And more than that, hostility with Iran right now is a subject of competition among two major political parties and is entangling with the internal problems of the United States. I understand that when the government or parties, they are short of any prescription to cure the economical problems, which are very chronic, hostility with Iran is a very simple issue. This is promoted all along. But anyhow, the key to the promotion of relation with Iran is the United States should respect both countries as two different countries and respect the other. The language of threat, the language of regime change, these are very humiliating, and it is totally away from any normalization path. So the first step is that they should respect the other side if they want to have a good relation. If they don't want a good relation, that's fine, it's up to them. But this is the key. I should here note that the American policy in the region is falling apart, and it is witnessing drastic failures, especially in Afghanistan as well. Thank you.
Next question. Mrs. Lederer, AP.
Mr. Larijani, I was wondering, since you started off describing Iran as a major democracy, and this is a subject, a press conference on human rights, I was wondering if you could please tell us why one of the major human rights lawyers, Mr. Abdul Fattah Soltani, remains in prison. Many human rights organizations have appealed for his release to your government.
Well, no lawyer is in prison because he's a lawyer or he's a defender of human rights. But any person who involved in activities which are against the security of states, especially their relation with terrorist group, in this case, Mr. Abdul Fattah Soltani's relation with terrorist groups which are responsible for murdering more than 10,000 people in Iran. So this is a very sensitive issue. The office, professional office of any person, being lawyer or being a clergy, should not be used for the propagation or for the infiltration of the activities of the terrorist group. Iran is a victim of terrorism. We paid very high price on that. So we are very strong and sensitive about any connection with terrorist group. Unfortunately, Western countries like United States and some European countries, they changed and then turned their capitals as the safe haven for terrorist groups. terrorists who are right now very much active in murdering and killing and different kind of terrorist activity inside our country, which takes away the lives of our citizens. And it is a very disgrace for nations like United States, like American and European, that their capitals should be given as a safe haven to these terrorist activities. Thank you.
Next question, Mr. Ali Batra from An-Nahar, Lebanon.
This lady was raising her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Larijani. My name is Margaret Bashir. I'm with the Voice of America. My question to you, since it's on human rights also, is about Mr. Shahid, the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations. He's asked numerous times to visit Iran, and he has not been allowed to visit yet. So can you tell me, will he visit, and why has he not been allowed to visit so far?
Our policy is active and proactive and positive engagement with the UN mechanism, human rights mechanism in the Council of Human Rights in Geneva, which reporting is a very important part of this mechanism. Our policy is open policy to our reporting. Until now, in the last 10 years, more than 7 thematic rapporteurs have visited Iran. So we don't have any objection on the merit of reporting. This is also true about the special rapporteur. Our objections lies, first of all, on singling out a country like Iran and appointing a special rapporteur for the human rights situation in Iran, while there are numerous other countries around us with dismal record on human rights, and even United States and European countries, and there is no reason for this selection. So this is the first objection. Secondly, we invite the special rapporteur to indulge in a professional reporting. Unfortunately, the special rapporteurs who promise to give a structural report and then indulge in a professional reporting and fair reporting is just put together, scissor and paste or copy paste of other reports and gave that to the General Assembly. Well, if he wants to copy paste other reports, he doesn't need to bother to travel to anywhere. I can produce for you in half an hour 100-page reports, because the virtual space and virtual media is full of this kind of allegations. So our first proposal is there should be a base, and no better base than our long list of recommendations approved in the Human Rights Council in Geneva of our UPR report. We can take one by one these recommendations, and he is very much welcome to present a professional report on each one of them. He can review our laws and regulations. He can review the way that we apply our laws, and he can also go into detailed discussion about the special cases. If he wants to follow a professional line away from propaganda, then he can come to Iran and stay for a year rather than 2 days. But he wants to make interviews with VOA and BBC Persian version and come to Iran for a couple of days with a list of 100 or 100,000 allegations. And when he's back, he says, oh, the situation was more miserable than the reports. So he doesn't need to bother to travel to Iran. We are after professional evaluation. We don't claim perfection, but we are very proud that we try to implement our laws. So we are very much transparent, and we consider ourselves responsible and accountable in front of implementing our laws. This is our major policy toward Mr. Ahmad Shahid, which I personally have quite respect for him, even if I don't agree with the way that he's pursuing his responsibility.
Mr. Batra.
From Al-Nahar newspaper in Lebanon. Thank you, Professor Larijani. I want just to, as a great defender of human rights, to just tell us, please, how do you evaluate the situation of human rights in Syria vis-a-vis the human rights records in Bahrain? And another question, please. Why Iran is manufacturing a nuclear trigger? What's the explanation for that?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, human rights is on my agenda. This is my life agenda. It's over 40 years that I'm working on that. At the time of the Shah, I was a political dissident, jailed several times, so I have a taste of what it means to be in prison. And then after revolution, it was all along my part and parcel of my working and agenda of activity from the governmental position. Human rights are pursued from different angles, one from the NGO and public, and the other is from governmental position. Governments, they do have sometimes ministers, vice ministers, agencies. So we also have created in Iran a governmental body which is called Human Rights Council, or High Council for Human Rights. So it is true, it is a very long life project for me. As far as human rights in Syria and Bahrain is concerned, our position is very simple and very explicit. We support all the way the wishes of the people of these countries, their drive for democracy, their drive for reviving the Islamic sentiment and culture. This is our policy from day number one of the movement of the people of Middle East from Tunisia. We stated that very openly. And also at the same time, we are against any external pressure, especially military and agitation and incitement to violence in all countries which are going through this fantastic and very important social change. We are against military activity or military meddling in the affairs of Bahrain, either by Saudi brothers or others. We think it is totally against the interest of Bahraini people, against the security of the region, against the interests of Saudi as well. They won't succeed. We believe that the wish of the people of Bahrain, Sunni and Shia together, are in the streets, not only the Shia. So it will succeed. The same is true for Syria. We think any incitement to violence by United States and Western countries and regional countries to export and send armed groups inside Syria and to recommend people to get the gun and get to the uprising and encourage them for armistic confrontation with the authority. These are very dangerous events. We are against this kind of meddling in the situation. Our position is that all the hands should be cut off from this kind of interference. It is up to the people of the Syria to decide. We respect, everybody should respect the decision of the people of Syria. Thank you.
Next
well,
question.
I think, let me just, one part is, that's nuclear fuses, EBW. This is a perfectly clear sign that the allegations against Iran is such a laughable allegation. EBW, which is called the bridge wire detonator, this is a part which is used in several technological devices, not only in nuclear, and also that things that they brought in a laptop, it was part of a lecture of a scholar to be given in some Western society, in Western university. So Neither it was a secret thing, nor it was part of Iranian government endeavor to do research on it, nor it is confined to the nuclear technology. I think they managed to put it together very naively.
Mrs. Pellet, BBC.
Yes, Barbara Platt, BBC. Just another question, sir, on the Iran program, given the IAEA report that basically says it has evidence that Iran is trying to achieve components of a nuclear weapon. Do you think that this report helps or hinders the whole process of trying to return to negotiations with the P5+1? And do you have a proposal for a constructive way of getting back to negotiations?
This report is a disgrace for the agency, which is supposed to be a reference body for all member states. And it doesn't include any evidence. It is based on a laptop which was given to them by the United States 4 years ago. And all the experts of the agency at that time considered these documents not reliable at all. And we have answered questions about this laptop 4 years ago in 117 pages. And it was considered by the agency good enough, and there is no other things to be added. So there is no single evidence against Iran in concluding that Iran is pursuing a military objective in its nuclear program. Our nuclear program is a matter of pride for our country. Every Iranian citizen is proud of that. Iran is #1 country in the area in having its power plant lighting the houses, in having the technology which is very, very advanced and sophisticated. And we are going to invest in R&D on that. There is no limit to our progress in this regard. Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapon for 2 reasons. #1, nuclear weapon does not add to our security. It is more liability than asset for us. Our military muscle is strong enough for deterrence for any imminent threat. Secondly, Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of the state, passed a fatwa 20 years ago that it is against Islamic jurisprudence, against Islamic teaching, that a country should endeavor on mass destructive weapons. So we don't need it. We consider that immoral and against the Islamic Sharia to produce that. So this is very obvious. And as the final part of the question, while the United States and a number of European countries, they do not want that this issue to be settled. They want to keep that as a vehicle of pressure on Iran. So this is the reason that they don't let diplomacy to resolve it. Our position is very simple. The world, European world, can ask us anything but to be deprived from this technology. The only possible equation is this: transparency versus cooperation. Nothing more than transparency could be asked from Iran, and the door of cooperation should be opened at the same time. So our message is very clear and explicit.
Next question, Mr. Nizar Aboud, Al Alam.
Mr. Larijani, recently the United States attempted to turn the Security Council into a court regarding the alleged attempt of the assassination of the Saudi ambassador in Washington. And again, the General Assembly has received a draft resolution from Saudi Arabia trying to accuse Iran of plotting. What is your answer to that, to these alleged plots?
Well, in fact, the main plot is not this. The main plot is U.S. plot to generate hostility in the region. This should be taken into account and serious. What is aired by the American authorities as plot by Iranian to assassinate one of our brothers in Washington is laughable. There is no single evidence for that case. And unfortunately, our brothers in Saudi Kingdom, it seems that they have submitted themselves to this temptation. I think they have fallen victim of this plot as well. So the real plot is American plot to destabilize the region, to create fear from Iran, and to promote their military adventurism in the region. So this is something that the General Assembly should take into account, which hampers the security of the region and the world.
Mrs. Flavia Bloomberg.
And this is not a new process. In the past, United States and a number of countries encouraged Saddam Hussein to attack Iran, and even encouraged Saddam Hussein to attack Kuwait. And then you know what was the end for Saddam Hussein, and they kicked him out of that place. So anybody who wants to fall victim of this temptation of the United States should think about the end as well.
Mrs. Flavia Bloomberg.
On Syria, there is a rising chorus of Arab leaders who are asking Assad. On Syria, there is a rising chorus of Arab leaders asking for Assad to go. I would like to know your assessment on whether you think Mr. Assad's days are numbered, and should the time come, would Iran be willing to offer Assad a safe haven?
Well, I'm quite aware of the positions of the United States and a number of Arab countries vis-a-vis the government in Syria, but the main question is that whether here democracy is the issue or not, because some of these countries who push the government of Syria themselves are quite example of dictatorship. So it seems that democracy is not the issue. So if democracy is not the issue, then what is the issue? I think the issue is they want to generate a government which is submissive toward Israel more than the present government. So if this is the issue, well, the end should be quite different.
Mr. George Press. Yes. Yes.
George Baumgarten, correspondent for Jewish newspapers in North America. I want to thank you, Mr. Larijani, for holding this press conference, and most especially I want to thank you, Natasha Karam, for opening the press conference up to the entire UN press corps instead of your usual invited guest list. I want to speak in particular to one comment you made about the 10,000 Iranians killed by terrorists. We had 2,800 people killed approximately on September 11, and it was a tremendous national disaster. You're talking about a group of people nearly 4 times that amount. In what period is this? Is this in the nearly 33 years since the revolution, or what, or the last half century, or in what episodes is it? I'd like to get some more detail about that statement that you made. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate this sensitivity toward terrorism. This number is only confined to 2 years. But if you go beyond 2 years, then the number may increase to about 70,000. In 2 years, this is the number that brought a lot of losses to our country. As I said, terrorism against Iran is a very important issue that should be taken by the world community. I cite for you 2 other examples which are very recent. 2 years ago, we sent a formal note to the government of the United States, and we gave them a lot of documents that the United States was supporting a terrorist group based in Los Angeles called Thunder Group, responsible for explosion in a mosque in Shiraz, which killed 17 people, injured 246. Fortunately, we captured their elements inside Iran, and they totally said that from where they got the money, where they got the training, and in fact, in their program was to blow up the Russian consulate in Rasht. And the leader of this group right now is living in Los Angeles. He has his website. He's also teaching the people on his website how to build explosives and how to put it in places and things like that. This is one example which we sent formal note to U.S. government. Another example, a year and a half ago, we sent another formal note to the government of the United States about United States involvement in helping another notorious terrorist group called Rigi Group, which is responsible for killing and injuring 560 people in our country. We captured this head of this Rigi group while he finished his meeting in a military compound of United States in Kyrgyzstan. So our intelligence got his way onto the border of Iran. Then we captured him. Then in his interrogation, all of these people got their court procedure and died. We are not putting to death people like the way that United States killed bin Laden. We think even a devil should be put into the court, indicted, then also punished. So these people very openly explained to us and showed documents that how they were trained, how they were logistically supported to do terrorist activities inside Iran. I think United States government's policy is very dangerous, and it is a disgrace. I believe no American agrees with terrorist groups to be pursued by his government and with his tax money inside another countries.
Mr. Larijani, you spoke of BBC Persian. Will allow a BBC Persian question as well? Your government has consistently jammed us, so wouldn't allow us to broadcast to Iran. So if you don't mind, I'll ask my question in English and Persian. Mr. Ahmadinejad was here and in September repeatedly asked, why is it, if Iran respects human rights, that his two opponents, many other political prisoners, are in jail, especially his two opponents, Mr. Mousavi and Karoubi. Once he said he had no idea, and the second time he said it was the judiciary's job and he didn't want to interfere. Let me ask you this one question. There is very basic respect for human rights. Where is Mr. Mousavi? Where is Mr. Karoubi, Mr. Larijani? Why is two of his major opponents in jail or under house arrest without any trial?
Well, nobody is in house arrest without trial and without court order. Incitement to violence is a major cause against them, and this is quite apparent for everybody. And being an opponent or a friend, a supporter of Ahmadinejad doesn't matter. Anybody who incites to violence, we will be very strict on him in the country. There is law, there is court order for that. I think this dossier, when it is finalized in our court procedure, then everybody will be aware of the details. At this moment, I will say that the only reason which this confinement has been considered is not incitement to violence only. There are other reasons as well, which are illegal activity. The art of living in democracy is that to pursue your objectives through legal means. If somebody loses election and claims that I don't agree with the result, and asks the people to come to the street and break the banks and start violence and change the government, this is not the way that democracy works. Democracy comes through the ballots, not through the numbers in the street.
The next question, Hank Film, Press TV.
Thank you, Doctor. A recent explosion that took place about 30 miles from Tehran killed 17 soldiers and one of the architects of Iran's missile defense systems. Several Western news outlets, including Time Magazine, have indicated that it was the result of sabotage by Israeli and U.S. forces. Iran has denied this. What were the circumstances of this explosion? Is there anything to these reports of sabotage?
First of all, it is a sad story that this explosion happened, and our number of our military personnel lost their lives. Secondly, we don't think that there is any indication that there was a sabotage. So the best estimation for us is that it was an accident. Thirdly, if U.S. or any other country claims to be part of this, is it a good action or not? Does it open the door for others to be done or not? If it is legal to go to another country and explode and cause an explosion in its air defense, so no other country should be immune of that. I think if people in the United States or in Israel are wise enough, they should refrain from this kind of claim, even if it is true.
Next question, Mr. Siapak from Scan News, Norway.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the press conference. My concern is about capital punishment in Iran. Are we going to see in the near future that law will be demolished? In Iran, anybody who do drug smuggling to killing and or even rise up against the government get the penalty of capital punishment. Can we see that law will be demolished as Iran trying to be an example in the world?
Well, your question had two parts. The second part, the cited cases that our law has capital punishment, it was absolutely not true. We have capital punishment for quite numbered and definite cases like rape, like mass rape especially, and like murder, like high degree of drug trafficking. Well, if this issue of capital punishment is a debate and a disputable issue all over the world, is a matter of debate. Even United States, there are numerous states that they do have it. If you are asking me that, whether the law will be changed in few years, I do not anticipate that, because a good number of people in Iran, law experts, they think that it is prudent, it is warranted that we should have this punishment. But if you ask me the more pragmatic question, whether there is a way to decrease the number of the executions, to limit that, this is the strategy that I really recommend. Yes, I think there are ways to bring down the number of the execution. More than 74% of the execution in Iran are stemming from drug trafficking related crimes. Well, whether it is correct or not, there is big question. Did this harsh punishment bring the crimes down or not? Well, in fact, did not bring it down. While some people say the reason for that, this failure, is not because the law doesn't work, is because next to Iran in Afghanistan, thanks to the presence of US and NATO troops, the amount of opium production at least increased by 20 times before. So so this is a debate. My argument is beyond that. We are paying a high price fighting narcotics in our borders. I mean, our people, our police patrol and border patrol are killed regularly, and enormous economical burden. And most of this narcotic is destined to the Western consumer. It seems that there is plenty of appetite in Western society for opium. So if it is true, then the West should share this burden with us. I mean, it's very easy for us to close our eyes and tell these drug traffickers that get lost and don't launch anything inside Iran. They will very much appreciate that. They won't distribute a single gram of that inside Iran. The major source of income is in Washington, in New York and Paris and London. So whether this is good or not, the present parliament is against this idea. Sometimes they call me a cynical person in advocating that. And I think it may not be reasonable to propose two options. Either the Western community should share with us this burden, or we totally abolish this law and keep our eye closed and let them go away from Iran. So fortunately or unfortunately, my proposal is not gaining momentum, but I'm making an argument all the way.
We have only 3 minutes. The last question, Mrs. Robello, ANSA News Agency.
Yes, thank you. On Syria, starting from the resolution on the Arab League resolution on Syria, and then there was more assault of foreign embassy in Syria. In your opinion, there is a human rights violation in the territory? Is Tehran taking distance from the Assad regime? What is your position?
As I said, my main question is that whether this position stems from the worriness of these countries in the Arab League about human rights. A good number of these countries who flag leading this pressure on Syria, they have very dismal record on human rights. So the main reason is not human rights. If it is not human rights, then what it is? So this is a very important question. Thank you.
Excuse me, we should, excuse me, the time's up and we should finish the press conference. Thank you. I would like to thank you all to participation and your good attention. Also, I should appreciate Dr. Larijani for his time and his answers.
Such a street person. Cut the time.
Thank
Can I answer the last question you raised?
Because there is another briefing every day. And
One, yes. No, I just very briefly because we should move to
before
other.
you, Irna has
Well,
the third.
Last question. Well, you see, I think it's up to the people of Palestine to decide which kind of life and structure, social structure they should have. They should be given this choice to decide, and all countries of the world should respect that. But I think the present program of the Zionist regime is not even 2 states. It wants to create a strong Jewish state, which is quite racial by nature, and create a lot of colonies so separated from each other, which is impossible to envisage that this colony could make a state at all. So this is not a good program and fair and democratic. I think all the Palestinians, those living in diaspora, those living inside, plus the Jewish, being Muslims or Christian, they should be given the right to decide in a very democratic ballot what kind of a state they want. 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, up to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.